It's good to see everybody today. I hope that your week has gone well. We're recording this on Friday morning, and it'll be out later this afternoon. This is a new podcast that we're doing that's just going to continue in our Revelation theme, following up from our Wednesday night from Tom and his ministry of Redeemed Idiots. He's been going 3 weeks now. I'd encourage you to watch on his social media. Redeemed Idiot at YouTube, Facebook. Eventually, it's going to be live on Facebook, probably another couple of weeks, right? Yeah. But we've been meeting here at 6:30 on Wednesdays here at Journey Church in Elgin. Every Wednesday the last 3 weeks, and we finally actually got into Revelation.
We made it.
So we made it. So obviously, Revelation is one of those books that it's either not talked about at all because we get a little overwhelmed with it, or it's talked about all the time and it becomes people's only focus in life. And so there's lots of different viewpoints and things like that. So what we thought would be helpful, and hopefully it's helpful to you, is just to look at each Wednesday night and then kind of bring up any questions that we hear in the following days. If you have questions, shoot those on Facebook to Redeemed Idiot, and we'll address those here. So we want to try to clarify. We want to try to answer any questions that are out there. So with that, on Wednesday, we got into the book of Revelation, read 2 verses. So it starts off like this: the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants the things that must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. All right, we're going to stop there. And I just want to ask you, Tom, and anything after, I know after I preach and things like that, there's times, I wish I would have said that a little bit different or clarified that. Anything that jumped out to you from Wednesday that you'd like to kind of address or clarify?
Yeah, so same thing. I rewatched it, obviously, and actually watched it twice. So just to see how it went. A lot of times with the recording and like, okay, did I present this well? Did I say what I wanted to say? Did it come out scripturally the way it's supposed to? And it did. But then I started thinking about it, and I was like, I'm going to watch this again, but from a perspective of not me watching me, but let's say I have no conceptual understanding and just try to hear the words. And I did notice something I did say. It's correct, but I want to be clear on what I was saying, because I had made this statement. We had talked about the bond servant point and the word doulos. And that is a legal term that actually comes from Mosaic, Levitical, the Torah, whatever people want to say. But I mentioned how that was part of the law for this to take place. But what was really the context of verses 1 and 2, to which you just read, is really a legal statement that Christ is now saying, hey, I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to show you everything. I'm not going to hold or hide anything. I swear to it. I promise. It's a guarantee. It's his testimony. And what I made a statement of was that within God's law, God doesn't operate outside of his law. Because a lot of people, they understand that God can do anything he wants. And absolutely, without a doubt, he can do whatever he wants. But he's a just God. And in the things when I made the statement, there's things we can't do outside the law, that he doesn't even operate outside the law, because that would really kind of make the law or make the Bible irrelevant, null and void, and what's actually true if he doesn't hold to what he says.
The truths that he has created, right?
Yeah.
Flow from him.
Yeah, exactly. So when I made the statement that he doesn't operate outside of his law, or he can't, meaning he won't because he's just. When I was speaking of that part of the law, was not as far as looking at from the Levitical, Mosaic, this is how we live, our life law, and people look at that from the sin-based concept of it, and this religious, this is how we live our lives. Because obviously, if you look at it from that context, murder is not a good thing. The unjust taking of someone's life. But that doesn't mean we can't do it. We still can commit murder.
Yeah.
But there are things that we are not allowed to do, that we cannot operate outside of. And that's because of the spiritual battle that's going on with God and Satan, that they stay within a certain realm. Like, here's the parameters. So Satan can't operate in certain ways. As an example, if Satan were like, okay, we don't want people having salvation. So here's people growing up, and all of a sudden this guy steps into church going, oh no, he might become, I'm going to kill him right now. Bam, he's dead. He doesn't have that authority. So there is that law that we can't operate outside, like time, space, matter. Yeah. That's what I was talking about, of not being able to. I hope that clarifies that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also, it's not talking about like the you mentioned the Levitical codes, the laws found in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, which many times, whenever Jesus is referring to the law, he is talking about that, but it's a much bigger perspective, because by the time Revelation is written, they have already established that you don't have to follow dogmatically the ritual aspects of the law presented in the Old Testament, right? Paul and Peter had a kind of an argument about circumcision and what did Gentiles need to do in order to be part of the kingdom of God, essentially, right? And they've already established, okay, there's the ritual law, and then there's the law that supersedes all of that, right?
Right.
And that's what we're discussing, that God does not break that. We're not getting into the little, oh, well, do you worship on Saturday or Sunday, right?
Right.
We're not talking about that kind of law, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. So one, not question, but an interesting part of this passage that I think is important for us to look into is the word soon, right? So it says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the things that must soon take place. Now, you used a great example of if you're out on the battlefield and you're calling for backup and you need help. You don't call the day before, right? Even though you know you're probably going to need it that day. You call when it's happening, when it's immediate, and that is the context, if you will, of this word, that it is happening. Now, what kind of misinterpretations of that word have you experienced in Revelation? Or maybe it may not be misinterpretation, but a misapplication of the word soon.
No, that's actually a really good question. I mean, obviously we've talked about it before, that there's the people have this concept or this idea. I'm not even going to throw in the word interpretation. They're looking at a word, and the word soon obviously being something in close proximity, a short period of time. So the assumption is made, and again, it's an assumption that all these things have already taken place in a period that has been soon. And the problem with that is, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, but the lack of understanding of all the prophecy that is completely spoken through Revelation that we actually pull from the rest of the Bible. And when you understand it, you see, well, okay, not all these things have already taken place in the prophetic stance into what Christ has said it was going to happen. So that's one of the issues, I think, and that's fair. That's fair, because the word soon
there is a challenge to some of the. This is why Revelation has been presented in so many different ways, right? Because there's a lot to this. However, I think I appreciate your perspective on the way that you're handling this. It's not as complicated as we make it out.
Yes, true.
Right. That sometimes we've added that complication, and so I've heard that because of the way that this is said, that it actually is referring, that the fall of the temple in 70 AD, which would have technically been before the writing of Revelation, that it's incorporating that into some I think what you're trying to convey and what I hearing you say is that word soon means that, okay, God, his plan is going on. It has begun, right? We're moving towards the ending. It doesn't mean that everything was fulfilled within a 10-year period from the time of this writing, right?
Right.
That I think we a lot of times bring our own understanding of time and try to fit God's plan into our understanding of time. That's very dangerous to do, right?
Right.
Because God is outside of time in many ways, and so I like viewing that and making sure we understand that soon it's not really talking about a time frame. It's talking about the starting point
Right.
of the finishing act. Does that?
Yeah. It would be kind of like, I think another analogy, because I use an analogy to understand what imminence is. Yeah. But I guess another way to kind of look at it is like, if you look at a marathon, you know, it soon needs to start, or imminently, boom, gun goes off, they take off running. But you still have to go through mile 1, mile 2, mile 3, mile 4. And if it's an Olympic type one, you still have to run into the stadium, do another 400 meters to come around the end, and you got to break a tape. There's a lot of things that must take place as you're going around this. So it's a long period. It's not this 100-meter sprint. It is a marathon that is taking place. And to your point, like you mentioned the 70 AD thing, where people think that is like the prophetical ending, and we're already in that time. That is, I'm going to say it, that's kind of a lack of understanding in terms of understanding Ezekiel, Isaiah, Daniel, and Ezra, and understand the prophecy that was coming from this, and understanding it in its true context. And we will get into this as we're going through Revelation. It'll never be on an attack on someone's belief. Like, here, I'm going to prove how wrong you are. I don't need to do that. It's not the concept of understanding Revelation and the events and the things that all this take place, but the prophecy of it and what Christ's word is. It's not an attack. It's just, if you follow through and you stay with it and you see all these prophecies, you turn to, and I've been down this, you start to see things like, that's not how I thought, believed, and taught, but this is what the Bible actually says. And that's all we're bringing forward. And you'll see that is not actually a factual statement that it was in 70 AD, but I'm not going to attack it. Yeah. You'll just be kind of going through and going, oh, it couldn't have been then. Hold on. This has, yeah. So I'm not here to attack and hurt people, especially when they've been taught something, they really believe it. Like, yeah.
No, I completely. And again, throughout this, there will be those things that you probably, what? I don't know, and again, we don't want to get caught up in just the minor little maybe differences that people have, right? It is the overall big picture, and it's the God's unveiling of what's happening. And I before I want to jump to the next thought that I had, but okay. I love the idea of the marathon. That this is God or Jesus. It's Jesus's revelation,
yep.
Right? And side note, whatever people, a lot of times when people talk about Revelation, in just casual conversation, they're like, "Oh man, that book of Revelations, it's tough," and they put plural on Revelations. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yes, I do hear that, and for me, I personally, this is Tom Burns speaking. I don't care.
No.
Because when they say it, I know what they're speaking of. Because I don't have perfect English.
Yes.
And I may say something to somebody, and I've been around people like, they're like, that's not how, my mom, that's not the correct way to say that. I think, you know what I meant though.
Yes.
But in all fairness, it also depends upon in what context they're speaking of, because all these things are little revelations. So if that's what their head thinking is, like, there's a bunch of things, revelations, and they're speaking in the plurality of it.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. We're all good. I'm not gonna beat you up over it.
It is funny because it is important for us to understand, and that's what these first two is. This is Christ revelation to us, right? He is revealing this.
His disclosure.
Yes, it's his disclosure, right? So it's just one. Now there's lots of little mini revelations with that.
That you'll see.
So yes, but I just always have laughed at that. That's kind of become common vernacular. Is people just say, "Oh, the Book of Revelations." Well, it's actually just one.
Yeah,
from one person.
Yeah, it's one single disclosure of all these little things that are going to take place.
And along the marathon,
right,
you see lots of different revelations coming to.
And we would see it as a revelation, like,
yeah.
But yeah, I've never been hung up on the plurality of people saying, I know what you're talking about, man. It's all good.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be.
No.
But it is funny how those kind of things.
But I have heard, and I've been to a church that he was speaking on Revelation, and not like a big study on it, just little points to it. And man, he was very adamant, like, do not say it is not revelations.
Yeah.
It is revelation. And this adamancy was so huge that at that time I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I was like very making sure I never said with an S. Like almost like it was a sin to say revelations. And I'll be honest, I did not understand why that was such a big deal until a couple years ago, like we've talked, and I spent that 2,500 hours and dove into this. Then it kind of made sense. When you don't understand a lot about something, you try to find something you sound like you know everything about. Yeah. So making a big, huge statement about revelations puts you like, okay, this is serious. This guy knows a lot because he's breaking this down to a single letter cult with an S.
Yes. Yeah.
And it kind of puts you back on your heels, like, I got it. And I think sometimes it's just a cover up to like, well, here's something I do know, like the helicopter thing. Yeah. People will profess that helicopter inside, outside, day and night. That's like the thing. Yeah. It's not a thing, but because they think they know something. Like, I got this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going too far on this Revelations thing.
But that's why I brought it up, because I think it also kind of reveals that a lot of times we make ourselves feel a little more religious or pious.
That's a good word.
By holding on to the little things. Like, man, I am following the letter of the law.
Right.
And we have to be careful with that. Should we be striving to live a godly life? Yes. But we need to be careful that we don't become what the Pharisees became. Right. Where we're breaking down every little thing. And I think this is an example of that.
Yes.
Especially if it really does bother you that someone says revelations. Like, if you ever actually correct someone, you're being kind of a jerk, right?
Oh yeah. And then if you are of somebody that someone's looking up to and talking to, and you immediately smack them down and chastise them over an ass, they've now lost that faith and that rapport with you. Like, I'm not going to ask this person more questions because I say the wrong thing or I don't put a comma here. They're going to tell me how stupid I am, and no one wants to hear how stupid they are. There's no reason to correct revelation to revelations. They'll figure it out as they go.
Yeah. So that just popped into my head, and so I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn there.
And I just want to further on that, just because you're making a statement like let it kind of go.
Yeah,
it's not that big of a deal. And I want to say it's just because that's one of the reasons I go here. Mm-hmm. Is because like I've said, I've been to a lot of churches, and because you do have that more of a relaxed personality. You're not here to beat someone down. You're sharing the word, and you're like a normal person. And if no one's seen any of his sermons, he's done this a couple times. In the beginning, he'll have this thing he's called "What the hell." Now,
the hell is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. What the hell is that? Now, me go to church. If a pastor said that, he said "He double toothpicks." Like there's something bad. No, he's just being a normal person. He's not cursing. He's not being derogatory. It's just something surprising that he heard or found out, especially in society. It's like, what the hell is that? And he'll share it with us, and it's kind of comical, but it's like, oh, wow, that's really enlightening. I didn't understand. So why I tend here and we talk a lot is because you're just a normal person. You don't ever run around this stoic, I'm the preacher kind of thing. You're just a regular dude that's up here talking to people and sharing the word. I just want to put that in there. That's an important thing.
I appreciate that. And that actually kind of goes to where I was going to go with this next is is that word you mentioned, doulos, servants, slaves. I mean, that is what it, but we have to understand exactly the context of that.
Yeah, so the biblical of it is the bond servant.
The
Yeah.
bond servant, exactly. Yeah. And that was a legal category of people, right? In fact, in Rome, probably the largest percentage of Romans or people in the Roman Empire were within the servant realm, right? I mean, and so it's so hard for us to divorce ourselves from our word slavery. Right. And so we do need to make that distinction.
Yes.
However, we don't need to take away the seriousness of what that word means, that we should be slaves to Christ, right? That we give our full allegiance. Now the difference is Christ doesn't force us to give that allegiance, but we should give that allegiance.
Absolutely.
And him alone, right? And that's one thing that I like about how you're approaching Revelation is as a servant, right? And people are talking about this stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
And one way that you can be a servant is by taking what God is revealing to us, right? That he is declaring, and sharing that with other people. That's part of what being a slave to Christ or a bond servant to Christ is.
Yeah. You said it all. I mean, exactly. That's the whole point. I mean, if you want to use the term slave to what it actually means, but as we understand what it is, someone owns someone, someone belongs to someone is over someone bought someone, however you want to word it. At the end of the day, the understanding is there is someone in charge and you are serving that person in whatever capacity. This person says, go do, you go do.
Go do.
So the same concept still applies. Christ is saying, go do. Get outside the walls of the church and go disciple to all nations. That's what I'm telling you to do. That's our servanthood to him. Go.
Yeah.
And that's the part I think most people don't understand. They think it's, oh, I need to act a certain way according to this and be stoic or not. You know what I'm saying? It's about me now. But he said, no, go tell somebody about me.
Yeah. No, that's right. And I think, of course, with your military background, I'm sure it hits a little bit different. I mean, that whole thing is structured, right, to where if the person has rank above you and is in the right, line, if they say go, you go.
Yes. No, that's true. That's awesome you brought up military. And here's why, because what is it called when Christ said to go out and do something? It was the commissioned.
Yeah.
Right. So we have commissioned officers. The commissioned officer has an authority to do something. You have been given an authority. You have now been commissioned to go out unto the world. Yeah. You have the authority to do that. So that's a kind of a nice parallel. Like, you're not just like this little slave, if you want. He's actually made you a general, if you will. I'm just use the military terminology, an officer. Yeah. You're now commissioned. Yeah. You have the authority to go teach this word to everybody. Yeah. Go. And that's kind of a cool thing. Like, he trusts me that much. Well, yeah, you accepted him.
Yeah.
He died for that, the salvation. Yeah. If you understand and believe this that much, you have the authority to go tell somebody now. Go do it.
And you've been redeemed. And so now you are commissioned to go and introduce other people so that they can be redeemed.
Exactly.
And it really, I love that analogy. And it's important that's how we view our relationship with Christ. Our relationship with Christ is not just the religion that we practice. It's not just the church that we
no.
It is the life that we live, that we apply this to every area of our life, right? That it should be making an impact in all areas of
100%, yeah.
And we'll wrap up here pretty quick. And again, I do want to encourage you as we go through this. We're just getting started. We don't really know what we're doing, by the way. We didn't really plan anything.
Redeemed idiot.
Yeah. We are leading into the idiot part.
Yeah.
And so if you have questions, please let us know. because we're just, especially for this one, we're just kind of shooting off the hip. Please, on his Facebook page, Redeemed Idiot Facebook page, there may be other ways that you can interact with us later on, but right now that's the best way. Just make a comment on that Facebook page with your question, and we want to address those. One thing to kind of close out that I think is important, especially with this bond servant slave idea. There are a lot of us, especially because we have all this mixed idea of slave and what that meant, that we, and in our individualistic Western society, a lot of us are kind of have that old West Texas feel, which I'm from West Texas, that you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, right? That you rely on yourself. And there's some good things in that, that we should take responsibility. We shouldn't always be the victim. We shouldn't be blaming and making excuses for everything. So there's a good aspect to that. But sometimes we get to that, well, no, I'm not going to be a slave or servant to anyone, right? Here's the reality, and here's the truth, and see if you agree with this. You are a slave to something. We are a created being. Therefore, there is something that we are a servant to. Now, you may not view it that way,
Right.
but and that's really dangerous, because if you don't recognize who your master is, who your Lord is, you're serving the wrong Lord.
Right.
Right. I see this. You can see this in and I've gotten more, I guess, dogmatic on this. Is there's really nothing secular. We throw that word secular out there, but everything is within the world that God created, and you're either serving God or you're serving the world, which, we're uncomfortable probably saying that you're serving Satan, because most people are not actively thinking that they're doing that. But if you are not a slave to Christ, you are a slave to the world, whether that's your political party, whether that's, that you're trying to make yourself God, but then you're just following worldly philosophies that are guiding you. So those philosophies are actually your master, right? It's important that we were created to be servants of Christ.
Right.
And if we don't do that, we are going to be servants of something else that will actually not only negatively impact us, but then we may be leading other people astray, even unintentionally.
Yeah, I think the word I think you put in there was really good. Well, I'm going to back up a second. So, I think there's the minor side of that when you're a slave to something. Now, being you're from West Texas and all that, I'm basically from Vegas. And it's funny, but it's not. There are people that are slaves to gambling.
Sure.
Slaves to that addiction. They're slaves to the sounds inside the casino, the environment, the hype that you get in the what is it? The endorphin release. I mean, you're kind of slave to that, and like the hope that I'm going to win, I'm going to make it big, though everybody knows that Vegas wasn't built on winners, it's built on losers. And it's not a funny thing, it's a sad thing. And just a quick little story on that, just a quick one. When I was younger, I used to stand in Circus to be up in Reno is where you could do it, and you could overlook down onto the floor and one of the casino chain that cages that you got your money from or check, did your chips in, was directly out in front of us by the front door a little bit. And you stand there and you watch someone come in with their Friday paycheck, some middle-aged guy, and he'll cash that whole thing out. And just kind of keep an eye on him. We're up there in the circus part, which is for kids, and little trapeze things, little games. And it would just be fun to watch and see where that went. Mm-hmm. And there's so many times seeing someone that completely lost everything they had, that entire paycheck, in an hour, 2 hours, or whatever, and go out the door, and they've got to go home. And I don't know who they went to home on. So there is that side. There is that slave to something. But I think what's even more, the word you use is the philosophy point. So even to that, whatever your philosophy is, whatever your belief is, you're slave to that. You are going to follow that philosophy, that thought, that spiritual, you have the we're all one in energy of the earth and us and stars, whatever that that is. And a lot of people do that. And that's where sometimes I'm not going to use yoga as a thing, but people sit down and do
those are kind of pagan worship things that we've.
Yeah, if they're looking for a different spirituality to it, yeah, I'm not talking about the exercise side to it. Like there's a good side to, shutting up for a second, go into a room and stretch. But what I'm saying is that's their philosophy. That's their spiritual realm. And they're slave to it because they believe in that and they follow that, and it makes them feel good in whatever way. So that's a good point. I think that term philosophy, you're slave to your own philosophy, whatever that may be.
Yes. And that's why our philosophy here at Journey, and I know yours with your ministry of Redeemed Idiot, is that our philosophy is that God is God and we are not. And we have been redeemed. And that is where we find truth. And if we're going to be a slave to something, which we are, why not be a slave to the one who created you, the one who gave his life for you,
right?
The one who has redeemed you, who knows all of your weaknesses and faults and all this hidden sin that you can have, who knows all of that and died for you anyway and has offered you a new life. That's the master we should seek to serve.
No, you're right. And if you don't look at it that way, why not look into it? Because what do you have to lose?
Yes. What do you have?
It's not going to hurt.
That's a great one. What do you have to lose? Hey, I hope that you enjoy this. Hope it's helpful. Please let us know. Send in the comments, ask questions. But we will be back here on Wednesday night at 6:30 for our next, and we'll get into the next few verses of Revelation.
Kind of an awakening.
All right. Sounds good. We'll see you next week.